Okay, welcome back again. This is part number 2 on social contagion. Now, some examples of social contagion that happen unconsciously. For example, you can read on mass hysteria. There are some journal articles posted in Moodle. You can check them out. An example like St. Vitus dance was considered as a curse due to sinfulness, and it became very contagious as other people were also experiencing St. Vitus dance, but actually it was like a pathogenic thing. And pathogen is, not pathogenic, I mean psychogenic. It's like psychological thing, عامل نفسي. Another example was a plant shut down due to what you call a mysterious sickness, a bug bite that affected female workers mainly. It was like a 5-day epidemic. After investigation, it turned out to be a psychogenic illness. So they thought that these female workers thought that they were infected by a bug bite, but again, it was like a psychogenic illness. And everybody thought that they got that bite, but actually not. It was only psychological thing, and it was very contagious, School, for example, in one of the schools, they smelled the toxic gas. So the school, they evacuated the entire all students and faculty. After investigation, and when they asked students, do you smell toxic gas? Everybody would be like, yes, we did. But after investigation, no evidence of gas. It was only psychogenic. So this can fall under like priming. If I'm like, okay, now think about a smell of something, and then imagine that you're smelling it, and then if one person out there fake it and says, guys, I do smell the smell of X, for example, and somebody else says, oh yeah, I smell it. So everybody would believe that they smell the smell, but the smell actually is not there. It is like psychogenic. So what is psychogenic? Psychogenic is like pretty much like if you sit with your family, with your friends at night, and you start talking about magic, about ghosts, and then you will get terrified of all these stories, and then once you finish the storytelling session, you go alone to the kitchen, the light is turned off and or on, and if you hear even smallest sound, you will get terrified. You'll be like, oh my god, a ghost is coming. No, it is not, but you scare yourself because of that psychogenic. Nothing there, but there is a priming effect in which you were told stories of ghosts, it became into your mind, then it became very contagious in the sense that all people who listened to the story would also experience that fear. Okay, so moving to the next slide. Maybe getting more stories or examples. Another example was like self-harm, such as suicide, AIDS seekers. This is by also mentioned by Olivia Nell, 1993, in which aggression and angry crowds. An example of mass hysteria, you'd find them mass hysteria, like panic, contagion, aggression and angry crowds. Very fascinating. Just go and check out the videos of let's say strike, the videos of protest, even Arab Spring, Tahrir Square, in other countries, all Arab countries. If you can see, there are many stories of aggression were reported, and aggression, harassment. It became like, it's like aggression and angry crowds. People became very aggressive, and everybody else became aggressive. So there was this notion of self-spread. It's like very contagious behavior. Another example of social contagion can be like teen smoking, speeding, and take an example. If nobody speeds in this country, they drive, they comply with traffic regulation. If there is one person starts violating traffic regulations, then another person sees him as like, oops, I'm driving, I'm complying with the regulations, by why this guy is overtaking me and driving 160 kilometer, why he does that, let me do the same, like the same thing. The other guy would do that, and the third person would mimic the third person, and the fourth person would mimic those three, and the three would be mimicked by, you see, basically it will just spread out there. Consumer behaviors such as fashion, fads, you can see people buy new items, the way they cut their hair, the new fashion, the way they dress. Who told you to do that? That is contagion. Take an example. Go to the fashion industry or to the fads. You would see like people, if you plan it, it might not be adapted, but it just go viral like this. It might be intentionally or unintentionally ignited, then it will just go viral out there. Even stock market behavior, the same thing. One person might be, for example, buy, everybody will be buying, but that buying behavior is not justified by any scientific means. Okay. Now let's go to the very interesting, let's study a very interesting example of a scientifically studied case of contagion and spread of several behaviors. I encourage you to go and check out this article, by Fowler and Christakis. Here is the citation down here, you can see. Social contagion theory, examining dynamic social networks and human behavior, published in Statistics in Medicine. It's very interesting. Just go and check it out. I will just summarize it, but I highly encourage you to go and read it. So Fowler and Christakis studied different behaviors like obesity, smoking, alcohol consumption, health screening, happiness, loneliness, depression, sleep, divorce, food consumption, influenza, etc., drug use. So they wanted to know how people get diffused, how these behaviors get diffused, and see what they found. So what the study was, they studied a sample of 3,232 Americans using name generators method. If you remember in lab 3, we discussed about how the sampling methodology of social network analysis or SNA approach. One of the method of sampling is name generator. So basically what this method is about, you ask participants, who do you spend free time with, and how do you discuss important issues with. Now this is would lead us to finding out the people with close proximity with few degree of separation. Interestingly, what they found that Americans identify an average of 4.4 plus or minus 1 standard deviation, 1.8 I mean alters, and friends 2.2, meaning that if you remember 4.4 is like, if you remember 6 degree of separation. Now even this one, they identified an average of 4.4, almost like 4.4 plus 1.8. So basically it would include, this would include that the people who influenced your behavior. For example, if somebody smokes and you ended up smoking, what separates you from those people that you have seen or influenced you directly or indirectly? What is that, the degree of separation? We'll discuss in the next slide. So let's check some of these, what they found, what Fowler et al. Found. Okay, let me stop this. Okay, so next slide. Okay, so let's take example. Okay, for example, obesity. Now, I want you to pay attention here. I want you to pay attention to the following. The x-axis here, the x-axis, the alter. Now you guys know what alter is. We discussed about alter and ego, right? Alter are the people that you are connected with in your own circle. And then we have here ego. Here is on represented by y-axis. For example, let's see here. When they ask participants, this is 1, 2, 3. This is the degree of separation. Now, let me just explain here again. Now, the ego, the person, has a chance probability of almost 45%. If you can see here, 45% increase in the probability ego of being obese if his or her close person in his or her circle is also obese. Now, that your closest friend, if obese, you're more likely to be obese. This is according to the study, according to what they found. The person that you know, the second person, second degree separation that you know, maybe a friend of your friend, if that person is obese, the probability you will also be obese is around 20%. Okay, now let's take an example of smoking. Smoking here, this is smoking now. If your close person, your very close friend, degree of separation is 1, is smoking, your close friend, increase in the probability of you or ego smoke as well, if that alter smokes, is around 150%. You see what I mean? Which makes sense, because people who are, if you remember the idea of homophily, you tend to like people who share homophily, similarity, you know, the same thing. If you like to play tennis, most likely you would be friends with the tennis players, those who share common activity as yours. Also, you can take alcohol abstention, heavy drinking, the same idea, you know. Let's take more examples. I wanted to check the articles itself. I'll just explain few of them. Take an example of, let's say, happiness. Yes, I like this example of happiness. Okay, so another example is happiness, the same thing. So now, the very close friend of yours, or your family member, or your relative, the close one, degree of separation is 1. The percentage, if that person, your friend, is who like direct contact with him or her, who is your alter, is happy, the probability that you, ego, also happy is around 15%, which is realistic. I mean, not like 90%. The same thing with they also studied, very interesting. Let me show. You see, smiling in profile picture in your social media platform. So this is very interesting, and I think this is very realistic. This is very interesting finding. What they found out that if your direct contact, like your friend, not a friend of your friend, or like very strong tie, not like weak tie, number 2 weak tie, strong tie 1, let's say. If that person, your alter, has his or her profile picture, a smiling picture, you as ego, you will also, it's about almost 8% you will have 80% probability you would also have a profile picture where you smile. Very interesting. The same thing with overweight profile picture and loneliness. Okay, now let me see what I have. Okay, the sleep. What is sleep here? Now let's take, this is probably the last example I'll just take. Now, if you're, let's say, let me just get, was it sleep? I have depression. If, after, okay, now sleep. If you alter the social distance is 1 degree, if that person, you will increase you as an ego probability of sleeping less than or equal 7 hours if the alter also sleep then more less or sleep 7 hours or less. Meaning that if your sibling, if you sleep with your sibling, with your brother or your sister, the same room, if that your sibling sleeps 7 hours or less, most likely 1 degree of separation, you will also end up sleeping 7 hours or less. If that person sleeps 4 hours or less, probably you too, you will end up doing the same thing. So this is the power of the behavioral contagion from this study. They also studied cooperation, very interesting, which is like, this is, okay, let me just, before we go to that, 2 more slides. Now, this is very interesting. The same thing that what we discussed before. So here is, you can see this is the probability. The line represents like a confidence interval, but obesity, let me take sleep. Here is the sleep we discussed, or smoking. Now let's take about smoking here. Let's take example of smoking here. Okay, decrease percentage in probability of ego smoking if alter stop smoking. If you alter stop smoking, what is the probability that you would also, the ego would decrease, will decrease smoking? Now, here how it is. Very interesting. If your spouse stops smoking, the decrease in the probability that you will stop smoking is around this percentage. You see, because spouse is very close degree of separation. Then it becomes mutual friend. If you're a mutual friend, you can see the probability here is almost 40 something. If your friend stops smoking, it's like 45% probability that you would also stop smoking, reduce or minimize smoking. And then friend, sibling, not really. You see, very interesting. Okay, what about sleep? Now you can sibling, very close contact, increase in the probability that ego sleeps less than 7 hours, but friend, then mutual friend, then friend. Okay, so this is just go to that article. It's very interesting study. I think you got the message behind this one, and I will stop here, and then I will take from part number 2.